Hello and welcome to The World This Week with James Dickman. A look back at some of the biggest global news stories for an international city, brought to you by the London Live news team. Tonight, over 100 inmates dead in a prison in Ecuador after a violent riot breaks out. The eruption of a volcano in La Palma reaches the Atlantic with concerns it's releasing toxic substances. Britney fans rejoice as the singer is granted freedom from her father's conservatorship. That's all on the way before 7:30, but first, two top US generals have said they recommended keeping a force of 2,500 troops in Afghanistan ahead of the full US withdrawal in August. Well, testimony by General Mark Milley and General Frank McKenzie to Congress seemed to contradict President Joe Biden, who said he did not recall any such advice. The Taliban took power in August after rapidly advancing through the country. General Mark Milley defended himself when asked in the Senate why he didn't resign when Biden didn't take his advice and pulled out of the region instead.
As a senior military officer, resigning is a really serious thing. It's a political act if I'm resigning in protest. My job is to provide advice. My statutory responsibility is to provide legal advice or best military advice to the president, and that's my legal requirement. That's what the law is. The president doesn't have to agree with that advice. He doesn't have to make those decisions just because we're generals. And it would be an incredible act of political defiance for a commissioned officer to just resign because my advice is not taken. This country doesn't want generals figuring out what orders we are going to accept and do or not. That's not our job.
General Mark Milley being questioned by the Senate Armed Services Committee there. Next, staying in the halls of power, but over in Germany now. The outgoing Chancellor Angela Merkel congratulated the Finance Minister Olaf Scholz from the rival Social Democrats on his election victory as his party gained the highest proportion of votes in the German elections. He now has a mandate to create a majority government. Mr. Scholz's SPD won 25.7% of the vote, whilst Merkel's Christian Democrats dropped to 24.1%, their lowest result in their 7-decade-long history. Well, the campaign was run under Merkel's party successor, Armin Laschet. Mr. Scholz now has a mandate to negotiate a coalition to form a new government in the coming weeks and months. Well, just before we leave Germany, let's hope the new Chancellor's attempt to form a coalition is less turbulent than these scenes. Take a look at this. Several tornadoes hit the northern German coastal city of Kiel early on Wednesday evening. A number of people were caught by the twister and some were seriously injured. According to the fire department, 6 people were taken to hospitals, 3 seriously injured and 3 slightly hurt. Although up to 60 tornadoes are counted in Germany each year, they are rarely as strong as those seen on Wednesday. Officials in Ecuador say more than 100 inmates have been killed and 80 others injured in a riot between rival gangs inside a prison. The carnage at the Littoral Penitentiary in the city of Guayaquil started on Tuesday. Police and military officials regained control of the prison 5 hours after the riot erupted. Officials said at least 5 of the dead were beheaded. It's thought the number of dead may be 116. To Haiti now, and thousands of Haitians who have been deported from the United States are returning home to a capital more dangerous and dystopian than the one they left years before. Well, over 2,000 Haitians deported from Texas landed in Port-au-Prince in the last week with $15 to $100 worth of cash handouts and a simple message of good luck out there. Well, the capital is in the grip of gang violence, more prevalent than normal as the police have struggled to gain any hold. Gang violence began to intensify in May following the death of their president, Jovenel Moïse, on the 7th of September, after the country's already weak government has all but collapsed.
The state is going from bad to worse. The situation of the people is worsening. It's becoming overwhelming for us Haitians. There is no hope for us, especially the young people. Day after day, the country becomes more and more difficult. The American government knows what they are doing. They are the ones who put us in this condition. They let go of the weapons that have come to them. The people he deported makes us more vulnerable. Nothing serious to help fix the situation they create.
Well, let's head up to the US now, and the singer R. Kelly has been found guilty of exploiting his superstar status to run a scheme to sexually abuse women and children over 2 decades. 11 accusers, 9 women and 2 men, took the stand over the 6-week trial to describe sexual humiliation and violence at his hands. The jury found him guilty on all 9 charges he was facing. Kelly was accused of running a Chicago-based criminal enterprise that recruited his accusers for unwanted sex and mental torment. His attorney spoke outside the court and said he thought a documentary influenced the decision.
He was not anticipating this verdict because based on the evidence, why should he anticipate this verdict? When you go over the discovery, you saw witness after witnesses giving 3, 4, 5 different versions as to what they said happened here. The government cherry-picked the version that they thought would be a continuation of the narrative that was first put out by Cheryl Mack and Surviving R. Kelly. And they cherry-picked a version and ran with that version. They totally ignore the inconsistencies that all of these witnesses gave in their debriefing. They tried, and I guess they successfully did it, was to massage it. But it's a situation wherein I don't know if I'm more disappointed in the juror's verdict or the government's action in this case. Thank you very much.
What happens next, sir?
Well, on the other hand, it was a good week for fans of Britney Spears as a judge suspended her father from the legal arrangement that gave him control of her life after Spears accused him of years of abuse. Jamie Spears was appointed her guardian in 2008 amid concerns over her mental health. Well, on Wednesday, a judge handed the role to a man appointed by the singer. Fans around the world have supported her through the Free Britney campaign, who have been credited with accelerating the case to its conclusion and shedding a light on the issue of conservatorship.
Yeah, this has been years and years of work, and this wouldn't have happened without the public awareness on this case. And I'm so proud of the Free Britney movement for making that happen.
Free Britney!
So, I mean, the Free Britney movement, you know, we've been fighting for terminating Britney's conservatorship, but, you know, this Free Britney is bigger than Britney because this issue affects thousands and thousands of people who are trapped in this very corrupt system. And so we've been able to affect change, you know, there's legislation that's been proposed, you know, at the state level and at the federal level. And so this has the potential to really impact many, many lives.
So you think
There you go. The World This Week continues after the break. We'll be taking you to the Albert Hall for the premiere of Daniel Craig's last outing as James Bond in No Time to Die. Welcome back. You're watching The World This Week from the London Live News team, a review of the main international stories that have broken over the last 7 days, still to come before 7:30. Women in Afghanistan on their plea to the international community to continue aid payments for female teachers and doctors, as many haven't been paid their salary in months since the Taliban took over. But first, to the fuel crisis over here, and the army begun learning how to drive HGVs to help deliver petrol supplies, as the Prime Minister Boris Johnson said the situation was stabilising. Ministers have confirmed that around 150 military drivers will help get fuel to the forecourts in the coming days. The country has been hit by shortages after a lack of HGV drivers and panic buying by motorists. The government says it is making plans to deal with supply issues across several industries through to Christmas and beyond because of the shortfall in lorry drivers.
We now are starting to see the situation improve. We're hearing from industry that supplies are coming back onto the forecourts in the normal way, and I would just really urge everybody to just go about their business in the normal way and fill up in the normal way when you really need it, and you know, things will start to improve. What we want to do is make sure that we have all the preparations necessary to get through till Christmas and beyond, not just in the supplying the petrol stations, but all parts of our supply chain. You're seeing the global economy really sucking in a huge amount of demand at the moment for gas, for lorry drivers. There are shortages around the world. It's affecting countries across the world, but we've got to make sure we have everything in place as the recovery continues, and that's what we're doing.
Well, the Prime Minister was one world leader ridiculed in a recent speech by teenage climate activist Greta Thunberg at the Youth for Climate conference in Milan, hosted by the Italian government. Thousands of young activists converged on the city this week, with some 400 from 190 countries engaging with policymakers. However, the 18-year-old from Sweden suggested in her speech that even the event itself was made by leaders to pretend they are listening to their concerns. The activist says there are many fine words, but the science does not lie. CO2 emissions are still rising.
This is not about some expensive, politically correct green act of bunny hugging or blah, blah, blah. Build back better, blah, blah, blah. Green economy, blah, blah, blah. Net zero by 2050, blah, blah, blah. Net zero, blah, blah, blah. Climate neutral, blah, blah, blah. This is all we hear from our so-called leaders. Words. Words that sound great, but so far has led to no action. Our hopes and dreams drown in their empty words and promises. Of course, we need constructive dialogue, but they've now had 30 years of blah, 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 and where has that led us? What do we want? When do we want it? Now. What do we want? When do we want it? Now. What do we want? When do we want it? Now. Thank you.
Well, the COP26 climate summit starts in Glasgow on the 31st of October, and all the big polluting countries must deliver tougher pledges to cut emissions to keep the goal of 1.5 degrees C within reach. Next, we head to North Korea, where they have claimed they've successfully tested a new hypersonic missile on Tuesday. These photos are taken from South Korea as members of the public watch the launch on TV. North Korea's state media said the new missile was one of the new weapon systems laid out in its 5-year military development plan, calling it a strategic weapon, which usually means it has nuclear capabilities. Well, Tuesday's launch is thought to be another indication of Pyongyang's growing weapons technology amid strict sanctions. Qatar Airways announced on Monday that it suffered more than a $4 billion loss in revenue over the last fiscal year as lockdowns triggered by the coronavirus pandemic slashed demand for long-haul travel. The state-owned airline largely attributed the losses to the grounding of its Airbus A380 and its A330 wide-body jets. Former French President Nicolas Sarkozy has been sentenced to a year in prison for illegally funding his unsuccessful 2012 re-election campaign. The 66-year-old was found guilty in a Paris court of spending tens of millions of euros more on his campaign than he was permitted under law. He will not be jailed, however, and he can serve his sentence at home with an electronic bracelet, the court ruled. Over to the Spanish islands now with an update on the eruption that took place Lava flowing from a volcano in the Canary Islands off the coast of North Africa reached the Atlantic Ocean by Wednesday, possibly triggering explosions and the release of toxic gas that can irritate the skin and the eyes. Well, lava from the eruption of the Cumbre Vieja volcano has devoured everything in its path, destroying 589 buildings and 13 miles of roads on La Palma. For days, officials were nervously awaiting the time when this would happen after its eruption on the 19th of September. Now we head back to the ongoing situation in the Taliban-controlled Afghanistan now. After they effectively banned girls from secondary education in Afghanistan, female Afghan health workers, teachers and rights defenders on Tuesday urged the international community to resume financial aid to Afghanistan, saying non-payment has disproportionately impacted women. One teacher said at a news conference in the capital of Kabul that 120,000 female educators and nearly 14,000 female healthcare workers have not been paid their salaries for the past 2 to 3 months.
We call on the authorities of the Islamic Emirates of Afghanistan to open the school to girls as soon as possible in order to ensure the safe continuation of education for both boys and girls in Afghanistan. We call on the international community, the World Bank, and the other donors to help us fund the payment of Afghan teachers' salaries in order to provide a quality education to boys and girls as one of their fundamental rights. Number 3.
Well, according to Jan Egeland, Secretary General of the Norwegian Refugee Council over in Kabul, millions of people in Afghanistan are facing catastrophic conditions in the upcoming winter.
There is a free fall now in the economy and the whole social fabric of Afghanistan. We will have to struggle to save lives this winter. Very many people will perish. They will not have food. They will not be able even to sustain the cold that is coming in 6-7 weeks from now. It's a race against the clock and against death. Well, the gross numbers for this country is that half of the population, nearly 20 million, need emergency help this winter, out of total population of 40 million. These are the same 40 million that the NATO countries left behind when they went for the door. It's the same civilians. It's just now there is no salary for teachers or nurses or doctors or water engineers or garbage collectors. There is no social fabric anymore unless there is a resumption of the economy. We cannot transfer money to the banks here because there is no functioning banking system.
Right, let's touch down back in London. Before we say goodbye, Princess Diana has been honoured with a blue plaque at her former London flat. The English heritage sign has gone up at 60 Coleherne Court, close to the King's Road in Chelsea, where Diana lived with her flatmates between 1979 and 1981, ahead of her marriage to Prince Charles. One of those flatmates, Virginia Clark, helped unveil the plaque. Well, that's all from the world this week with James Dickman. We'll see you at 7 next Saturday as we round up the biggest international stories for a global city. But for now, we'll leave you with highlights from the premiere of the new James Bond film, No Time to Die, which arrived in cinemas this week as Daniel Craig says farewell to the iconic spy. Good night.
been a kind of bittersweet couple of years, so one has to keep things into perspective. The decision to leave is still there. I'm just glad that we've got a chance to celebrate tonight and just have a premiere. It's just that's in like such a far away thing for a while.
No hunting. No hunting. Daniel Craig, I want him to be Bond for as long as possible. He's been tremendous, but I think, tonight is about celebrating his achievement, giving him his time, and also celebrating all the real life heroes that we're also acknowledging here tonight, the people that have gotten us through the pandemic.